Welcome to Anchors Away, a podcast for boaters. I'm your host, Matt O'Hara, owner of the Queen Boat Company Marina on Lake George and the Freedom Boat Club franchise on the same lake. We've been doing the boat club for quite a while now and have several years of marina ownership under our belt, offering full service department, ship store, fuel dock, storage, dock space, and all the marina amenities you would come to expect. Each episode features an in-depth conversation with a boating expert or industry leader talking about their life in boating and some of the exciting things they're working on in the marine industry. We cover boating tips, tricks, the latest in technology, and many other things boating. Our goal is to inspire you to get into boating if you're already a boater, to improve your boating experience, and if you used to be a boater, to get back into boating and stay on the water longer. If you've seen a boat rising out of the water as it gets on plane and seemingly gliding above it, you've seen hydrofoiling in effect. Hydrofoils have been used in high technology applications like the America's Cup races for years and have recently been applied to recreational craft, including smaller runabouts and even surfboards. I've been interested in learning more about foiling on the water, why they're used, what benefits they provide, and how they work. Luckily, I had a chance to speak with Tom Ward, founder of Epoch Boats. Epoch Boats is helping usher in a new era in boating, building accessible hydrofoiling boats that are efficient, eco-friendly, and high performance. Their first class of boats is the Skiff series that will be introduced in the middle of 2022. Tom broke into the marine industry as an engineer for SeaStar Solutions, where he rose to director of engineering and managed a fleet of test boats. He transitioned to Lippert Components, where he also held the role of director of engineering before deciding to strike out on his own. Tom's also served on the ABYC Tech Board and is just a wealth of knowledge about everything that makes boats work. We talked about growing up around boats and sailing, his experiences at SeaStar and Lippert. I got a great education on hydrofoils, and we discussed what Epoch is coming to market with. Enjoy. Tom, thank you so much for joining me. It's an exciting time for you. I've seen a lot of work on prototypes and testing and all kinds of really neat stuff happening. So I know your time is probably limited, and we're doing this at 8 p.m. at night because we've got kids that have to go to sleep. And my guess is you're probably going to get off this call and go back to work engineering something or thinking about something with your current projects. So I appreciate the time, and maybe this gives you a little break from being at a whiteboard or at a drawing table.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to you here on Anchors Away. It's glad to be here and glad to be able to talk about the cool stuff we're doing at Epoch.
So how did you get into boating?
I was pretty much born into it. I was really fortunate in that my grandparents owned a house at the Jersey Shore. So I was born in June, way back when. And then I think by August, my parents had me on the beach and in the water. And my dad, he had a Hobie cat. So he probably had me tied into a trapeze on that before I could walk. The rest is history. I learned how to sail solo when I was 8 years old. Started on Sunfish, graduated up to lasers, eventually into Hobie cats. In high school, I was on a rowing team, so I was always on the water. That was my sport, and it was a year-round sport. We were really competitive. And then, as I got into my career, I eventually got a job at SeaStar Solutions, designing steering systems and shift and throttle controls, which was a dream job. And then I moved over to Lippert Components, where I was designing advanced products for the marine sector. I was also working with our windshield division, our furniture division, our canvas division. So just all around the marine space. It's really been a dream to be able to take that from a hobby and something that I grew up in into being my career. And, obviously now at Epoch Boats, we're at the next level where not only am I making parts for boats, but I'm making the boats themselves. So it's just been a dream come true.
It's interesting that you were a rower. That just in talking with some people in the industry, the guys from Pure Electric are all rowers. A bunch of the guys from Flux Marine are all rowers. I wonder what it is about rowers and environmentally friendly boating that has all these different companies full of rowers.
That is a great question and a weird coincidence. I don't know, maybe because when we're in a scull or a sweep, the gunnel height and the transom height is about 2 inches above the water when you're drafting. So you're in the water, you're getting sprayed by oars and everything. Maybe that just gets us so close to the water that it forces us to be environmentally conscious.
Interesting. Where on the Jersey Shore was the house?
Down in South Jersey, just south of Atlantic City, and Avalon is the name of the town.
So you were sailing solo at 8. Who taught you to do that, or courses, family, self-taught at 8?
Not definitely not self-taught. I wish I could say that. Combination of learning from my dad, which was kind of probably not the best education, but definitely a functional one, and then courses on top of that.
And did your family have that Hobie Cat throughout your childhood, or were there a few different boats involved?
We still have the Hobie Cat now, although it hasn't been on the water in a number of years. Once I graduated up into power boats, when I became an adult, I haven't actually really sailed since then.
So does your family get involved with power boats, or are they still sailors at heart?
Still sailors at heart. Yeah, my dad actually races J105s all up and down the East Coast. So, from Block Island down to Key West and into the Bahamas. So he thinks I'm a little weird being focused on power boats, but it's good.
And how did your career end up getting you to SeaStar? Because I know that wasn't your first engineering job. Did you have an eye on the marine industry from the start and jump when an opportunity came, or was it a lucky coincidence?
It was really a lucky coincidence. So when I was in school, I studied biomedical engineering, and particularly I studied proteomics and genomics, which is the Human Genome Project. And it had nothing to do with mechanical stuff, nothing to do with electronics, all on the computer, all in the lab. And then I think this is a common trend for a lot of people. I never used it a day in my career. I graduated and I immediately went into industry and I learned electromechanical engineering on the job, started in the medical device industry, eventually went into consumer electronics where I was designing currency validation systems. So if anybody listening has ever bought a Coke bottle of Coca-Cola from a vending machine, the part that takes your dollar bill is my part. You've touched one of my products. Um, and then just very, very fortunately, one of SeaStar's division, it's actually the division that started SeaStar Solutions, and it was originally called Teleflex Marine back when it started, was about 20 miles from my house. And a great mechanical engineering position opened up, and I applied for it, and all the stars aligned, and I was able to get in there and really dive in deep into the business. And I progressed there from a senior engineer level up to the director of engineering, and then ultimately made the change over to LCI after that.
I think one of the interesting things about your time at SeaStar was probably the opportunity to work with all the different engine manufacturers and OEMs. What do you think you took away from that?
I would say definitely. We got to work with all of the major manufacturers, and we got to work with all of the major boat builders too. Names that any name you rattle off pretty much has either a SeaStar steering system or a SeaStar control in it. And I have huge deference for all of those legacy companies. They build amazing products. They've been doing it for years, and they're great. But unfortunately, the boating environment is a harsh environment, right? And we see that it's especially harsh on internal combustion engines. And some of the things that we've done from a regulatory perspective in the United States in particular around ethanol and fuel related issues makes the environment even more difficult on those engines. So the biggest thing that impacted me during my time at SeaStar was actually that as director of engineering, part of my responsibility was being over R&D and new product development. And I had a fleet of test boats that were all internal combustion test boats that were my responsibility to make sure that we could go have product or boats that we could put product on and do testing. And that basically put me in a situation where now I have multiple internal combustion engine gas powered boats that I had to make sure were maintained year on year, going through winterization and carburetor rebuilds and training the fuel and making sure that we get all the salt scale out of the cooling system and all those things. And it was hitting my budget and it was taking up a lot of time. And there were days where we had to do critical tests and a boat might not work because of some of those issues and some of those problems that come around. So I think that really left a big mark on me that said, there's got to be a better way. What I ultimately ended up doing was buying a small aluminum boat with an electric motor for personal use. And it was night and day, right? This boat is great. I plug it in my backyard. It plugs right into my house. The batteries are always charged. When I want to go to the lake, I unplug it, I trailer it, I put it in the lake, and it works. And there's almost no hassle. There's almost no maintenance fees associated with it. If the electricity costs anything, I don't know it. It kind of blends into my normal electricity bill. But the downside is that It's really not an inspiring boat to be on. It's great. I go out there, it's clean, it's good use case for fishing, but it never goes more than 5 miles per hour. If it gets too windy, I get stuck, going head into the wind. So I think the combination of those two experiences, managing the internal combustion engine test fleet at SeaStar and then having my own low cost electric boat, put me in a situation where I said, I really want a electric boat that is easy to maintain, inexpensive, but when I mash the throttle, I want to go. I want to get up on plane. I want to get above plane like we do at Epoch. And I want to go fast. And I want to have a lot of fun with it. And, I'd like to do it in a boat that isn't going to cost more than my house. And kind of all that came together. And that is what the idea behind Epoch is.
So how hard a decision was it going from, a nice job at Lippert where you were doing a lot of interesting things to saying, I'm going to start my own company and see if I can build this? I mean, I can imagine some sleepless nights involved, especially with a family. Talk me through that thought process.
It was definitely a really big decision. And part of it was that I didn't start it saying, I'm immediately going to build electric boats. I actually started it from a pure environmental aspect. The IPCC report that came out over the summer kind of, set off a bunch of red flags for me. And I looked at that and said, okay, I have to do something. Lippert is an amazing company. It was a great company to work for. They were really good to me. I have great memories and friends and colleagues that still work at Lippert. But for me personally, I said, I have to go get involved to try and make the world a better place, a cleaner place. And I can use my engineering skills to go work in climate tech and do something here. And I talked to a number of climate tech companies and startups, and I had a couple of job opportunities with them. And that was the big thing that prompted me to transition away from Lippert and into climate tech. And as part of this, being in the startup space, I was talking to some investors, and some of them basically said, "Hey, if you were going to do whatever you wanted to do, what would that be?" And the way that sometimes this question gets posed is, what is the intersection of things that you're passionate about, things that will be good for the world, and things that can make money? And when I started thinking about all that, I said, electric boats really, really is the intersection of those three for me. And thankfully, through some of the investors that I spoke to and some of the advisors, it came together and decided this is the path I'm going to go down. I'm going to start Epoch Boats, and we're going to try and thread the needle right into that intersection of those three things and put a really cool product out there that'll be good for the world.
So I want to get more into Epoch, but before we do, I want to do foiling 101. And just for my benefit and probably for a lot of people's benefit, just talk to me a little bit about foils, what they are, what they do, why you use them, and then we'll relate that back to Epoch. But it's such a new technology for a lot of people to see on boats, and we're seeing some cool boats with them at shows and stuff. But I'd love to hear kind of maybe in as unengineering layman's terms as possible, why that's such an important innovation on boats.
So a foil, essentially, it's the cross-sectional profile that generates lift when that profile is driven through air, and we're able to get a pressure differential on the top and bottom. And airplane wings are foils. So when we talk a hydrofoil underneath the boat, you can think of it just like an airplane wing. As we apply speed to that boat, that foil is going to generate lift, and it's going to raise the boat out of the water. And the huge benefit in boating is when we look at the medium that we're operating in. So in an airplane, we operate in air. It's not dense, right? You can go sprint down a track and you can move quickly. But if you jump in a swimming pool and you try to sprint, you're going to move much more slowly. And that's because water is about 800 times more dense than air. What the foils allow us to do in a boating application is we raise the entirety of the hull out of that dense water, and then we just have these slim foil profiles operating in there, and that drastically reduces the amount of power needed to push a boat through the water. And the key benefit is that increases our speed that we can travel at, and it also increases our range for a fixed set of fuel. And really, really quickly and really basically, to put that in terms of what that means for range. If we take a boat that's in the size range of what Epoch is manufacturing, and we put a 15 kilowatt engine on the back of it, which is about a 20 horsepower equivalent, with a 5 kilowatt battery, that boat will be able to go at wide open throttle for about 20 minutes. And at a max speed of about 25 miles per hour, we're going to get a range of just shy of 10 miles of ultimate range in that boat. Now, if we put foils on that, it's going to decrease our power requirement from 15 kilowatts to about 4 kilowatts. And that means we're going to be able to travel at speed for over an hour. And now, instead of this 8 to 9 mile range, we're going to get about a 25-mile range out of that boat. And that's what makes foils kind of a killer app for electrifying boats, because now when we look at the ratio of weight of fuel to weight of engine, and we look at the ratio of weight of batteries to weight of engine, the foils allow us to really leverage those batteries and still get a compelling range out of the boat without adding too much battery weight.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, triple the range, triple the time is not a small difference. So you knew you wanted to go into climate tech. You saw the intersection of boats and climate and green. When did the light bulb for foils go off in terms of that's what's going to help you get there?
So that actually jumps back to my background in sailing. And if anybody watches the America's Cup, you see these high performance sailboats that run on foils, and they go really fast, and they're great. They're really technically challenging to sail a boat like that. I mean, I've never done it. I don't think I could. But that was kind of I think the seed that said, hey, if we can use the wind and we can take this giant racing sailboat and get it out of the water and make it go that fast, imagine if we did that, with propulsive power. And just working through some back of the envelope calculations, I kept looking at it, and for a little while I was looking at it and saying, what if we just took foils and used an internal combustion engine? Or we could increase the efficiency of that boat as a whole, and that would have a good environmental impact. And what kind of took me to the next level was just continuing to look at how pollutive boats can be on the water. And a big thing there is that boats don't have catalytic converters. They don't have advanced exhaust systems like you would see in a modern day spark ignited car. And what that means is that the CO2 that comes out of a boat per gallon of fuel burned is pretty equivalent to what we would see in a car. But the non-CO2 emissions, because we lack those advanced exhaust systems, are orders of magnitude higher than what you see out of like a Mazda on the road. And that type of pollution is pretty insidious. It's actually, if you look at the California Air Resource Board, they recently put out a ruling that says by 2028, they're not going to have small spark ignited engines like what you would see on a weed whacker or a leaf blower or lawnmower. And it's because of those exact type of emissions, the non-CO2 emissions. So, it's carbon monoxide related emissions, which incidentally also creates a problem for anybody who's behind a boat, water skiers doing water sports. It's nitrous related emissions, so NOx, and it's hydrocarbons. By transitioning to electric, we can really take those down to basically zero in terms of local emissions, zero from the boat itself, and then we just have to look at how the power and the electrons that got on the boat were generated.
On Lake George, where we are at the first business getting permitted for the e-foil surfboards. I'm sure you've seen those. And I'm kind of interested to see, at least that starts to give people a visual of what this looks like and a little experience of foils on water. Just such a stark visual. It's just so different. I mean, what are your kind of thoughts on just getting people used to seeing a boat that's gliding above the water and not through the water?
So one of the benefits of our design is that when the foils are in the retracted state, it looks just like any other boat of that class. And I say it that way because we're starting with skiff style boats, but ultimately we're going to expand into other styles of boats. And foils only come out for the person on the boat when they're actually at speed and when they decide to deploy them. So if you were to see an Epoch boat on a trailer, you'd be able to see the foil structures, but they'd be tucked up against the hull, and it wouldn't necessarily be obvious that it was that different to a layman. Maybe an astute boater would probably understand that there was something going on there. So I think in that respect, the fact that our boat really looks like other boats in the class in the niche in the market that we're entering into will help that a little bit. And then beyond that, there's always going to be some friction. There's people who maybe fall into the seeing is believing category, and then there's people who just will never adopt it. I mean, I'm a nostalgic person. I think a lot of people are nostalgic, and there's something about some people when they fire up a two-stroke and they get that distinct exhaust smell, and it might remind them of their
Yeah.
childhood and fishing with their grandfather or something. And we can't take that away from people. All that we can do is provide an option for people who are ready to adopt it. And I think one of the nice things about the option that we're providing is for a lot of people, it provides an overall better experience. I never want to rebuild a carburetor again in my life. I'm done with that. Like I've done it so many times, and with E15 ethanol, in the fuel supply year round now, it's just it's a matter of time for any small engines. I'd be pretty happy to never have to go drive into a crowded gas station on a holiday weekend to have to fill up my boat with the boat in tow as people are running around with bags of ice and everything. Like I'd rather just unplug and go right to the lake. I'd rather not have to deal with winterization, right? So these are all things that by providing an electric option, we're able to remove those issues related to boating for people. And I think there's a very similar use case for electric vehicles. And once people get into that and they understand it, hey, it's the end of the day. I put my boat cover on and I plug it in just like I plug in my cell phone. And whenever I want to use it, I unplug it and it's ready to go. There's a huge benefit to that. And then there's also total cost of ownership related benefits to it. So we take away the maintenance, and for people who do their own maintenance, it means you don't have to buy those materials, fuel filters and impellers and the like. For people who outsource their maintenance, it means you don't have to pay all the fees associated with it. And then we look at the differential in fuel cost. And I was running some calculations the other day of what it looks like on a electric foil boat to go 70 miles versus a standard displacement or planing internal combustion boat to go 70 miles. And the difference was it was about $5 in electricity on the electric foil boat versus over $100 in gasoline in the internal combustion engine boat. So once you start to look at those differentials and add up those numbers over a 5 or 10 year life cycle on a boat, you say, wow, I can have a high performance boat and I can save myself a lot of money and a lot of hassle. And I think people will come around once they see it and once they start to understand that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's the key. Experiencing it is definitely vital. So tell me more about exactly what you're building. Give me some specs. What are you building right now, and where do you see that evolving over the next couple of years?
So right now we're launching with our skiff series of boats. So it's a flat bottom aluminum hull construction boat. We're ranging in feet from 14 to 18 feet, and equivalent horsepowers are going to be 15 up to 60 horsepower, depending on the class of the boat and the options that are put on it. So the traditional market for these boats is technical fishermen in the Gulf Coast region, where they're fishing in really skinny water. These boats draft about 4 inches, and the fact that they're aluminum hull is nice for a couple of reasons. It's lightweight, which helps with the foiling aspect, but it's also really durable. So in shallow water applications where there might be oyster beds or rocks, the aluminum hull is able to kind of resist any kind of impacts that happen there. Outside of that, we've actually seen some interest from people locally in the Jersey Shore because there's a lot of intercoastal waterways that have tidal areas that have shifting sandbars and things of that nature in shallow water. So we're starting to see a little bit of interest there. But that is our launch vehicle. And then from there, we're going to expand out and we're probably going to be looking at bass boats as our first expansion beyond that, and maybe lower cost, kind of more simplistic John boats at the same time. It's hard to predict the future, right? And we're
Sure.
customer centric. So as we progress and we grow and we evolve, we're going to let our customers really guide what comes out in the future. But we do have a roadmap to go down that path.
The interesting thing about being a founder is not only are you developing concepts and business strategy and helping with marketing plans and pricing, you're also welding and testing and doing pretty much everything. I've really enjoyed watching your social media, and you guys do a fun job of making all of your followers feel involved in every step of the process and getting a boat in the water. When do you think you're going to have boats in the water ready to go?
So we have prototype one in the water right now. It's it's powered and we're running it. It's really fun. We're not quite ready to show that on social media yet, but it'll be coming pretty soon. And then we're taking everything from that and we're building our production intent boat, which will be done sometime in April. And our intent is that we're going to take the production intent boat and we're actually going to travel around pretty much everywhere east of the Rockies over the subsequent 6 months. So, we'd love to come up to Lake George and get you on a test ride. We're going to head down to Texas. We're going to be in Florida. We're going to be up in Maine and Massachusetts. We're going to be in Rochester. So that'll be a great opportunity to really let people see it. We'll also be running it at a lot of local bass tournaments. Something some people might not realize is that, like in Pennsylvania, where we're based out of, 47% of our waterways in Pennsylvania are electric only as of today. So we're going to spend a fair amount of time in our local waterways as well, showing the people who are really close to us geographically what this can do and what this means. And then beyond that, we're spooling up production. So we're looking at a kind of June, July timeframe to be able to deliver first boat to people on our waiting list.
Where did the name Epoch come from?
The definition of it is a new era in something, a significant change, and our marketing, our CMO might yell at me because I probably botched that definition, but that was something that was important to us because we see a shift coming. When I look at the history of the boating industry, where we went from IO drives with inboard, like small block Chevy engines, and then we had this shift into outboards, and then we had this huge shift from two-stroke outboards into four-stroke outboards. I see that we're going to have a very similar shift in electric. And like we mentioned a minute ago, it's not going to work for everybody, right? People who want to go out in blue water, we're not there with battery tech. From a physics perspective, we might not ever get there, but a large percentage of boating applications can work with electric, with the tech we have today. And year on year, battery costs are getting less expensive and energy densities are getting higher and better. And that's only going to be a trend that continues. And especially when we compound in volatility of fuel pricing for hydrocarbon style fuels, we see this seismic shift. And that's kind of what drove Epoch, is that if we believe that we're entering a new era, we should be on the forefront of that era and we should have it be part of our name and part of our identity.
How can people learn more about Epoch, and is there anywhere else aside from your website you would drive people who just want to explore the hydrofoil space?
So our website is a great place to start, epochboats.com, and that's spelled EPOCH. We have two opportunities to sign up on the website. One is for a wait list for anybody who's interested in purchasing an Epoch boat, and it's a first come, first serve wait list. If you sign up, we'll contact you and we'll figure out and make sure that an electric boat solution is right for your use case, and then work through what options are available and what that means in terms of cost and delivery time and availability. The other is we have an update list. We send one email a month, so we don't spam anybody. We don't share your data. That's a great way to stay up to date. And then beyond that, as you mentioned, we have pretty active Twitter and Instagram account. I think we're pretty active on Facebook as well. So anybody can follow us on those channels. Feel free to reach out. We're very responsive. We love to talk to interested boaters, potential customers, and even maybe people who don't believe in electric boating. We're certainly happy to hear alternate viewpoints.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you want to talk to the person and find out if this is really what they're looking for and what will fit their boating needs. How are you thinking through Matt O'Hara calls you and says, I want an Epoch? Like, what are some of the questions you're asking to determine what the best solution is going to be for me in that space?
The biggest thing related to whether electric boating is right for a boater, it really comes down to that individual's use case. And the biggest difference that we would have in an electric boat in terms of use case versus a gas boat is going to be range, right? And we hear range anxiety all the time. If we go back to that example from before about the kind of 8 mile range versus the 25 mile range once we add in the foils, if we were to look at a similarly outfitted internal combustion engine boat with a 5 gallon fuel tank, that would get about 50 miles of range. So just to lay that out really simplistically, internal combustion, 50 miles of range. Epoch boat with hydrofoils and a 5 kilowatt hour battery pack, we're going to give about 25 miles of range. And then if we had an electric boat with no foils, we're going to get about 8 miles of range. And that is kind of the biggest factor is the range that is available going to work for your use case? And when I look at the way that I typically will run a boat on inland waters and freshwater lakes, it would be pretty rare for me to go 25 miles in a
Right.
single day. And that's really the driver is if you're gonna be able to work within this use case, you're gonna get all these other benefits related to ease of use outside of the water and total cost of ownership benefits and not having to deal with maintenance and things of that nature. But the last thing we want to do is try and push somebody into an electric boat and then 2 months later just have them miserable because they got stranded out on an island or out in the middle of a waterway somewhere. So we really want to make sure that people who are buying it understand its benefits, but also its limitations.
Well, thank you. This was informative for me, and like I told you before, I use this as an excuse to learn things I'm interested about, and I think it's great. I think it's really exciting what you're doing, and now I'm really eager to see the finished boat in the water that you teased me about. So if you have any videos that you can send just me after this, please send it. Best of luck, and thanks again for joining me.
Thank you, Matt.
I hope you enjoyed that and learned a little something. I try to cap these at a half hour, and when we hit that time, I felt like I had barely scratched the surface with Tom given his vast expanse of technical knowledge. I particularly wish I had more time to ask about his work with ABYC, but maybe that will be for another time. Keep an eye out for foils near you, and now when you see those crazy looking boats riding above the water, it won't seem so crazy anymore knowing how much more range and mileage they are getting out of their battery or fuel tank. Till next time, happy boating.